Hey guys, welcome back to NWCS. And now that we have all the parts for the door jamb completely routed, the last thing I want to do before I go into the assembly process is actually making and marking all my hinges. So the first thing before I can go into that process, I want to go ahead and use a story pole. And to do so, I need to make one. Typically with a story pole, you cut the stick as long as the door plus whatever margin you want to have at the top of your head jamb. So in this case, I'm aiming for like a 3/16 margin. So I'm actually going to cut this stick slightly longer than the door by 3/16. And then whenever I go to actually mark and place all my hinges, only thing I have to do is actually butt this to the top of the door jamb and mark everything for the door jamb. But then when it comes to the door, I hang it past that 3/16 margin, and that'll give me the perfect hinge placements. And then when I route and mortise all my hinges, when I go to hang the door, I'll have that perfect 3/16 gap at the top. But before I can actually lay out this stick, the first thing I need to do is actually get it cut to the proper length. And then after that, the next thing I need to do is go ahead and actually lay out where I want all my hinges. I believe for this door, we're planning to have four 3.5-inch hinges for this door assembly. So the first thing I do is I believe it's standard for your bottom hinge to be like 8 or 15 inches. I can't remember what the standard numbers are. I had to ask my buddy, and he pretty much told me all the numbers for the top and bottom hinge. I believe the bottom hinge is typically like 15 inches from the bottom, and the top hinge is about 8 inches from the top. And then I just centered my other two hinges based off of those locations. I can't remember exactly what those numbers are. I do greatly apologize, but it's something that you can Google and it'll pop right up. But I believe it's like 15 and 8. 15 from the bottom, 8 from the top, and I believe that gives you the proper placement for your hinges to make sure that the door doesn't bind as it closes. It has something to do with how the top hinge is under tension and the bottom hinge is under compression. So by spacing them that way, you get a proper swinging door. People smarter than I have actually figured all that out. I just know how to implement the process. So after getting that bottom hinge and the top hinge marked out at whatever those numbers were, the next thing I need to do is actually use a little bit of math. And as a carpenter, I think I'm pretty good at that. So what I want to do is actually figure out where my other two hinge locations need to be and make sure they're properly centered in between the opening that I now have after placing my top and bottom hinge. And then I'm going to actually use my hinges themselves to trace out the outline or the full width of each hinge. So that way when I go into laying everything out on the door jamb and everything else, I have the full top and bottom of each hinge. And I'm not second guessing whether or not the mark I made on my story pole is the top of the hinge or the bottom of the hinge. I want the full hinge fully laid out on top of my story pole. Makes it a lot easier, and again, it removes room for errors. And in this type of operation, you don't want to get all the way to the door built and then realize you routed your hinges in the wrong location. Let's just try to avoid that by taking the extra time now to lay it out. And the method that I like to use to get equal spacing is to actually add up the pieces that I'm going to have inside of the space. So in this case, I'm going to have two hinges in between the top and bottom hinge. I know each one of my hinges are 3.5 inches, so that is 7 inches. If I take 7 minus the remaining space that I have between the top and bottom hinge, and then divide that by 3, because I have two hinges, I know I'm going to have 3 spaces. So divide the remainder by 3, and that gives me the accurate spacing for each one of my hinges. And that way I can actually measure from space to space, lay out my hinge, and then make sure that I have the equal spacing in between the two middle ones. I'm also going to double check as I lay this out, because again, accuracy is key. After this is laid out though, we're going to go into actually marking all the marks on the actual door jamb itself. And again, with the door jamb, all I have to do is actually line up my story pole to the very top of it and then transfer all of my marks. I did make sure that after making all my marks on the face or the edge, I made sure I took a square and transfer my marks all the way around to the side. That way it was easier to actually transfer everything over to the door jamb. And now that everything's laid out on the door jamb, I'm going to take a framing square to actually square off the lines to make sure I know exactly where to place my hinge jig. And something we have to do in the next video is actually make one, because typically the hinge mortising jigs you can buy from Home Depot or anywhere else, they don't allow you to clamp onto a door jamb. They're meant to clamp onto the side of a door. So in this case, I want to make a jig that I can use to actually route out my hinges on a door jamb like this. So we're going to actually take my original hinge template jig and actually make an actual hinge template that will work on this scenario. You guys will see how I implement all that in the next video. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this process, and if you did, let me know down in the comments. Leave me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.